This month for our Gateway talk, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're actually going to be looking at a fairy tale from the collection of the brothers Grimm, the famous German collectors of folklore. And this story is called Lucky Hans. And this concerns a young man who was an indentured servant for a long time for a master, in fact, for about 7 years. And one day he conceived the wish to go out and explore the world, the wider world. He'd worked very hard for just this one household, and he'd come from a small village, and he felt he should go out and see the world a little bit more. So he went to his master and asked for his wages, and for his recompense, he was given a large piece of silver that the master had, who was very wealthy, about the size of his head. And putting it in a knapsack, he set off on his journey. And he thought, first of all, well, I suppose the first thing I should do is begin to make my way home. But it was quite a journey, and he undertook it on foot. This obviously took place a long time ago. He hadn't gone far, and it was a hot summer's day, when actually he suddenly realized that he was rather thirsty, and he'd like something to drink. And just at that moment, over the brow of the hill in front of him came a farmer with a cow. And he thought to himself, oh, a cow, I could milk a cow. So he went to the farmer and asked if he could have the cow. And the farmer said, well, what have you got instead? And Hans showed him the silver, and the farmer's eyes gleamed, and the exchange was made, and the bargain struck. The farmer went on his way with the silver, and Hans was left with the cow. He'd never milked a cow before, and the cow didn't like him very much and actually tried to kick him. And he realized this was perhaps not such a good idea at all. And he was really getting quite miserable and thinking he wanted to get home quite quickly. When just at that moment, over the brow of the hill came a horseman with a horse, leading a horse. And Hans thought to himself, well, that's a good mode of transport. So he stopped the man with the horse and said, would you swap the horse for the cow? And the horseman, who happened to want a cow, said, okay, I'll do that. And so the change was made. And the horseman said to Hans, he said, if you want to make the horse go, just say giddy up. And if you want him to make him to go fast, just say go faster, and he will go fast. He will gallop. And so Hans exchanged the cow for the horse, climbed up on the horse's back, and said giddy up. And the horse began trotting along. But Hans had actually never ridden a horse before, and thought it would be quite good to go into sort of, high speed mode. So he said, go faster. And suddenly, hardly had the words emerged from his mouth, and the horse bolted. And it took all of Hans's strength just to hang on to the horse. In fact, he didn't manage to do it for very long, and he very quickly kissed the dust, bashing his head as he fell off the horse in the process. The horse stopped and came back to him and began to lick his face. But Hans really didn't like this at all, and thought he didn't feel very safe with the horse after that tumble. And so he wondered what he was going to do. And just at that moment, over the brow of the hill, came a man with a goose. And he thought, actually, you know what, I'm also beginning to feel quite hungry, and some eggs would be very good for me. And so another exchange was made. And off went the horse, and Hans took the goose, and he took one of his bootlaces off and sort of tried to tie the bootlace around the neck like a collar and lead. But the goose didn't like him. He wanted to go with his old owner. And so the goose attacked him rather badly. And so much so that Hans felt he really couldn't get very close. And in fact, the goose began chasing him, because they can be quite vindictive once they get going, and chased him into a nearby town. And there, in the middle of the town, Hans saw that there was a knife grinder who was sat there with a large millstone and a queue of people who were coming up having their knives sharpened, and they were paying quite handsomely for the task to be done for them. So Hans thought, do you know what? That's what I need. Something that I can just make a bit of money with, and then I can get food, drink. I can possibly get a carriage home or something like that as well. And that's really all I need. It's much better than trying to tackle animals myself. I'm just not cut out for it. So he managed to grab hold of the goose and holding it under his arm, went to the knife grinder and said, would you happen to have another millstone that I could use so that I could grind knives as well? And clearly the knife grinder saw Hans coming, realized he looked quite young and green, and looking around on the ground, he picked up a stone, a round stone, and just gave it to Hans and said, here. And so Hans, in exchange, gave him the goose. And off went Hans with his stone. And he thought, right, he said, okay, I'm not far from home now. This is what I'm going to do, set myself up as a knife grinder. And so he put the stone into his knapsack, which was about the size of his head. And off he went. So he left that particular village, and a few miles further, he came to the outskirts of his own village. And just outside of the village, there was a little brook that ran, and it was still a hot day, and he was still very thirsty. So Hans decided to wash his face and take a drink before he arrived home. And so, kneeling down by the brook, he leaned forward and splashed some water into his face. And as he did so, the knapsack, which he hadn't closed properly, came open, and the stone that the knife grinder had given him banged him on the back of the head and fell into the brook to be lost forever. And Hans stood up after all this and suddenly realized how much lighter he felt. And with a spring in his step and a whistle on his lips, he went home. I remember reading this story thinking, my God, the worst businessman in the world. And maybe that's what this story is about. But actually, if we look at it a bit more closely, we see something that is really very prevalent in us, and that is the world of our changing desires. First, we want one thing, and then we want another. First, Hans wants to go out into the world, and then he wanted a drink, and then he wanted transport, and then he wanted something to eat, and then he wanted to make some money so that he could satisfy all his desires. And then he lost that. And it was only when he lost all that that he suddenly realized how much lighter he actually felt. And what had he lost, really? What was it that he felt a relief from? What he felt a relief from in this story, actually, is that restlessness of heart that really doesn't give us very much peace at all. And particularly nowadays, I mean, in our world, we hear a lot of people talking about, consumerism and materialism and so on and so forth. And people worrying about things. I mean, obviously, right now we have a cost of living crisis, and a lot of people are finding it very difficult to make ends meet, and that produces a lot of anxiety. So, in fact, our desires can lead us, into a lot of anxiety. How are we actually going to make ends meet? And for some people, that it's not playing that down. That is a very real thing. But there are also an awful lot of desires that I feel that I have to fulfill because I can't live without certain things. And we're not just necessarily talking about the basics of life here. We're often talking about ways of life. Certain things. How would I live without my phone? I remember once giving a talk to a group of Zen students in a meditation hall that's called the Zendo. And we were on a retreat. It was just a one-day retreat at the temple. And I'd noticed, because I got there a little bit early before people came, that a lot of people were sitting on mats. There's about a dozen people there. Most of them were sitting on the floor, on the mats. You have a square mat, and then you have a piece of folded quilted cushion called a zabuton, which raises the buttocks up, meaning that you can get your knees down and sit with your knees on the ground. And also there were a couple of people on chairs as well. And what was so interesting was that every single cushion had a different arrangement of cushions. So, it's quite normal for people to have extra cushions, maybe a small round cushion or a small square cushion, maybe a thick wedge Someone on the chair had a thick wedge, and I myself used the, sit on a chair now, but use a sort of piece of wedged foam cushion to sit on. I remember making the point in the talk, once everybody had come in and sat down. I made the point in the talk saying, what would happen if we turned up for a session and there were no extra cushions? Would we say, oh my goodness, well, I can't possibly sit one day retreat without, my arrangement of cushions? Would it be too much? And, not that I mean, obviously we are allowed to use extra cushions. That wasn't the issue. But, from time to time, something happens in life, and something that I feel that I absolutely am dependent on is taken away. And what happens then? What's my reaction? Is it, do I just say no? And if I'm coerced, if there really is, if life for whatever reason has given me no option, do I then become terribly afraid? Do I fall apart? Do I feel my world is coming to an end? Or is it possible to have faith in the body and to let go and say, well, we'll just see. I'll sit as far as I'll sit with this arrangement just as much as I can, and once I can't sit like this anymore, then I can't sit like this anymore. Which is a quite different sort of attitude. And actually, in the Zen training, a lot of students are pushed into that. Certainly in the monasteries, the monks, have a lot of their choices restricted deliberately to see how well the monk can adapt to the circumstances. It's part of I must have, a cup of coffee in the morning before I start the day, otherwise I can't function properly. And then suddenly there's no coffee. There's no hot water either. So what happens then? It's an interesting little thought experiment, if you like. But what we also find is that the heart is always producing these little desires that come up. They say, oh, I must just have this, and I must just do that, and that these desires, whilst they're sort of unfulfilled, seem to have this promise attached that if only I can get, or if only I could get rid of, then all would be well. The heart would be at peace. So there's an unfulfilled desire always has this promise attached to it that, everything will be fine. We will find peace at heart. We will find nirvana, if only I can get sort of X or Y. And the Buddha diagnosed this. The Buddha diagnosed this was a situation, and he recognized through his own insight that although we tend to think it's the world that's the problem, if only I could get the right cushion arrangement, then I could sit well. If only I'd slept better last night, then I wouldn't be, struggling to keep awake and having a rotten time, on this retreat, etc., etc. If only I could find something to drink, or find a millstone or grindstone or something like that, then all would be well. But actually what the Buddha recognized was that this agitation doesn't come from the outside. It actually comes from the inside. And I'm always sort of reminded there was in the 90s there, and in the early 2000s as well, I think there was that comedy program, Frasier, from the US, based in Seattle. And it concerned the two brothers, the Cranes, that they were called the Cranes. And they were both psychiatrists, and they were both very well to do, and they both loved the finer things in life. And in one scene, they both arrive home, having just been to a swanky new restaurant that had just opened. And Frasier Crane says, "Oh," he said, "wonderful, wonderful. The food was delicious. The wine list was varied and perfect for the menu. The service was exquisite. There was just one small thing." And the au pair, who had a very dry sense of humor, sort of smiled wryly and said, "Oh, well," she said, "that's just how you like it." And there is that thing, isn't there? Things can be, even in a swanky restaurant, things can be perfect. But, there's just one small thing that doesn't quite suit me. So I'm always able to find something lacking. And this is the important thing to recognize about desire, that desire itself arises as a consequence of the perception of a lack. You know, um, if we think about our desires, or the next desire that we have, or the last desire that we had, that somehow, or even the desire we might have now in this present moment, that we can reframe it, or we can see it in terms of what at this moment is lacking. And that is the very question that Master Rinzai, the great Master Rinzai, Zen Master Rinzai, asked his monks one day. He said, "What at this moment is lacking?" Um, and this is this question was devised to really make them look. There they are, sat on their cushions, clothed, fed, accommodated, safe, or as safe as one can be in an uncertain world. What at this moment is lacking? Of course, if you ask me, I can probably give you a list as long as my arm. And I'm sure many of you can too. We want the world to be this and that and the other. And of course, the world carries on worlding, doing its own business, and quite regardless of how I think it ought to be organized, which is rather annoying, really. But there you are. Uh, it doesn't seem to be particularly interested in my opinion. Oh dear. Um, and as a result of that feeling of a lack that the heart comes up, this produces desires. And if a desire happens to be met, such as in Hans's case, he gets the cow, he gets the horse, he gets the goose, even when he gets what he wants, it doesn't actually last very long. And then the shine wears off it. And then the next, that lack is still there. That feeling of something missing is still there. And so another desire is formulated. And what we seem to be having, and this is really what the Buddha diagnosed in the Four Noble Truths, is that this feeling of a lack is constantly projected out onto the world. And that projection out of the heart's desire, if you like, for something is irresistible. And I must go after it because it will not give me rest. There's and thus we have this feeling of restlessness. If even just down to the most mundane thing. I mean, if you've ever sat down with a remote control in front of a TV and you switch it on and you think, "Oh, I don't like this," and then you go to the guide and you go, "No, no, no, no. Oh, we'll try this," and you watch 10 minutes and you go, "Oh no." And it's funny, at those moments, it can be quite useful to actually just sit there and say, "Now, what is this restlessness? Where is this restlessness?" And actually, if we really look at it, this dissatisfactoriness, as the Buddha called it, this is what the Buddha called dukkha. That's the Sanskrit term for it. This restlessness, sometimes also translated as suffering, because this is what the Buddha meant, is in our own heart. And that was the Buddha's diagnosis. This is why the Buddha said that the cause of our suffering is this constant dissatisfactoriness, this constant feeling of dissatisfactoriness with it. Again, Master Rinzai says, because you cannot put your heart at rest, so you go chasing through the six realms. The six realms are a reference to the six realms that are classically found on the Buddhist wheel of life. These are the realms of incarnation. But really, we could just say that they are six states that we are constantly in one way or the other. First, I want this, and then I want that, and then I want to go over here, and then I want to go over there, and so on. This constant sense of restlessness, not being able to just sit down. And I remember, again, my late teacher, Venerable Myokyo-ni, used to give an experiment where she said after a hard day's work, to come home and just for half an hour, to sit in my most comfortable armchair and just do nothing. You've earned it. You've worked hard today. You've got 30 minutes. Just sit down and just do nothing. And she said, don't meditate, don't do zazen, because even that is something, isn't it? You know, I do zazen because I want to settle my heart. No, just let go. Just let go. Don't switch on the TV. Don't look at the phone. Don't call anybody. Don't look anything up on Google. Don't make a cup of coffee or vape or anything. Just sit there for 30 minutes and enjoy one's own company as it is arising right now for the next 30 minutes. My goodness. Well, what happens? Well, probably a couple of things might happen. One is that I start thinking about things, isn't it? And before long, I'm entertaining myself. And entertainment may be thinking about something fun or something funny, that a funny incident that might have happened, or it might be thinking about what I'm going to do after these 30 minutes is over. Or the other thing is that I fall asleep. And really, both of those are sort of escape mechanisms, if we really look at it. I mean, um, getting lost in daydreams is really just a way, if we look at it, it's a way of escaping from the here and now. It's rather like if I've got a chore to do that I don't like, like if, I don't know, cleaning out the kitchen cupboards or washing the car. So at the same time, I put my headphones on and listen to a podcast or listen to some music because, whilst I'm having to clean the car, I may as well make good use of the time and do something useful, like listen to the news or listen to music or something. It's all a way of escaping, which again, this is not to have a go at people who, I mean, we all like to listen to music and listen to podcasts and so forth, and there's nothing wrong with that. But am I doing it to escape being in the body, being in the here and now, with things just as they are? And if that is the case, just reflect on what a pity that is, that I don't even like my own company without some kind of distraction. I mean, it is a pity, isn't it? And because of that restlessness, my goodness, people can sell me a lot of rubbish. And because now I feel I have to be constantly entertained because I can't stand my own company. In fact, maybe it even makes me depressed. Maybe because I don't even like myself. I mean, what a pity. What a pity. And if there is that feeling that I don't like myself, then I am condemned to this world of desire, to constantly have to be distracted. What a pity. Really, what a pity. And why is this? How did we become so estranged from myself? And this is what the Buddha also spoke about at great length. In the northern tradition, the Mahayana tradition, it's said that the Buddha, upon his own enlightenment, sitting under the Bodhi tree, exclaimed, "How wonderful, how miraculous! All beings, but all beings, are fully and completely endowed with the wisdom and the power of the Tathagata," which is just another name for the Buddha. But sadly, because of their sticky attachments, human beings are not aware of it. So what are these sticky attachments that prevent us from being aware of this, what the Buddha calls the wisdom and the power, wisdom and the strength of the Buddha nature? What is this wisdom and strength of the Buddha nature? This is the heart. This is our own human heart, which is the source of our life. In Buddhism, this is how it's seen. And it's said that the Buddha himself didn't discover, but rediscovered the path back to this ancient city, which is called the human heart. Because actually what he said was, in the same way that it's the heart that projects this feeling of lack out into the world, the reason that we're compelled to chase after it is because it's the heart itself that we are chasing after, that we want to go towards. But we cannot see the heart because of these sticky attachments. We cannot see the heart directly. And so it can only speak to us indirectly. So in other words, this restlessness is a symptom caused by the own heart itself in order to draw our attention. The problem is that we mistake the forms, the objects, for the heart. And that is why once we get the object, the heart withdraws and we're just left with an object. What's missing is that vitality that the heart temporarily lent the object. And now the heart has to get projected out onto something else in order to draw our attention to it again. So what are these sticky attachments then that prevent us seeing the heart directly and therefore allowing the heart to become fulfilled by itself, in itself? Fundamentally, the Buddha's diagnosis was that we become attached to myself. And what is this I? It is the things that I identify with. This is what we call ourself. And the Buddha said that this myself, this self, this I, which feels himself to be separate and existing, actually is just an appearance. It's a stream of thoughts. The thought of I is I itself. What is it made up of? It's made up of my wishes, my loathings, the things that I don't want, and also particularly my opinions as well. And again, it's not that there's something wrong either with the wishes or with the opinions, except that I mistake them for myself instead of seeing them for what they really are. Impermanent, fleeting, made up of elements that over time fall apart again, and the error of self-identification with those things. And this is why when we experience a deeply held opinion that I have being challenged or threatened in some way, there is a tremendous reaction that comes from the heart. And I'm sure we've all experienced this. We've been with somebody perhaps who disagrees fundamentally with something that I believe in, my own view. And what a tremendous reaction that can bring up inside, to the point that it feels almost existential. And to the point perhaps where I say, well, I cannot be with this person anymore. They are a threat to me. And so we turn away. And to a greater or lesser extent, these are the things also that I identify. These things are the things that I identify with. So rather like coming in and seeing the, for the sitting, and suddenly seeing that the cushions aren't available, and I say to myself, well, I can't sit. See, I cannot sit. I won't even give it a try. Maybe it is possible. As I said, maybe it is possible for a time to sit it out. Might not be so comfortable, but the strength is still there to actually sit it out. This is what the Buddha said. We're all endowed with the wisdom and the power and the strength of the Buddha nature. But if I am so strong-willed and must have my own way that I will not give it a chance, then I turn away and the opportunity is gone. So this is why we practice restraint in Buddhism, because what we are restraining really is a little bit of that picking and choosing, having things always my own way, how I like them as I see that they should be. And also, as a consequence of that, having to bear the reactions that come up as a result of not always getting what I want. Because when I don't get what I want, sure enough, you can bet your bottom dollar there's going to be a reaction one way or the other. And it may not be anger. It could be depression. It could be a feeling of hopelessness. It can be anxiety. and be all sorts, but there will be a reaction. And that's how we know that one of my attachments, the attachment to I, which is the basic attachment, according to the Buddha's own diagnosis, is actually there. So what we gradually are doing is that this energy that comes up, learning to bear this energy within our own system without giving rise to the to having to grasp or to reject into the world, but just being able to restrain and hold with it, that energy itself begins to grind away that intolerance of I. And what happens is that the heart becomes relieved, rather like Hans did when that rock fell out. We stand up and we suddenly realize that actually it's okay. I didn't get what I want, and it's okay. And this time I did get what I want, and that's okay. And the heart can live with and without what it wants, and it's okay. And if everything is okay, even not getting what I want, then the world becomes a much less threatening and a much less frightening place. And we begin to recognize that wherever we are, it's okay. And thus, the restlessness of the heart, which is generated by wanting and its corollary anxiety, is unnecessary. And so it becomes less of a problem, all in all. Okay, we'll leave it there for now.